The neon lights of Black Reach Station flickered like dying stars, casting eerie shadows that danced across the rusted metal walls. In the depths of the lower levels, where decent people feared to tread, a broken soldier was about to meet his destiny. Alec Voss had always thought war would make him stronger. He believed that pain would forge him into steel, that fire would burn away his weakness and leave only strength behind. How wrong he had been. The war didn't make him stronger, it shattered him into 1,000 pieces. Even now, 5 long years after walking away from the chaos, the memories haunted him like vengeful spirits. A flickering street light could bring it all back. The distant hum of a starship docking at the station could send him spiraling into darkness. The screams of dying soldiers would echo in his mind. The sharp smell of burning metal and flesh would fill his nose. The weight of his rifle, which had become like another arm, still felt heavy in his hands during sleepless nights. The faces of those he couldn't save appeared in his dreams, their eyes asking the same question over and over. Why didn't you help us? 5 years. 5 years since he left the military behind. 5 years since he walked away from the bloody outer colony wars. Yet here he was, deep in the belly of this rotting space station, and he could still feel the weight of those memories clinging to him like chains. The past never truly let go it, just waited, patient as death itself. That's exactly why he had chosen Black Reach Station. This place sat like a spider in its web, halfway between the lawless outer rim and the so-called civilized inner systems. Here, nobody asked uncomfortable questions. Here, ghosts could disappear into the crowd. Here, a man could lose himself in the shadows and maybe, just maybe, find some peace. For months, Alec had been running cargo for independent traders, barely making enough credits to survive. He was content with the silence, happy to fade into the background noise of station life. The work was simple, honest, and most importantly, it didn't involve pointing weapons at other human beings, until tonight, until everything changed. Because, standing in front of him, trembling like a leaf in a storm, was a ghost of an entirely different kind. She was tall and graceful, despite her obvious fear. Her skin was a deep violet color that seemed to glow softly in the station's dim neon lights, like she carried starlight beneath her flesh. Long black hair fell in messy waves past her shoulders, partially hiding her face. But her eyes, golden eyes that seemed too large for her delicate features, held a terror so raw and desperate that it hit Alec like a punch to the gut. He had seen that exact look before, reflected in mirrors and in the faces of soldiers who had lost everything. She was filthy. Her clothes were nothing more than torn rags that barely covered her body. Her hands shook as she clutched the edges of what might have once been a cloak but now looked like scraps of fabric held together by hope and desperation. She wasn't just a refugee, she was running from something terrible. Without warning, she dropped to her knees and bowed so low her forehead nearly touched the grimy station floor. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the station's background noise. "Please take me in. I will serve you in any way you ask. I will cook your meals, clean your home, do whatever you need. Just, please don't send me away." Alec felt his breath catch in his throat. He slowly looked around their surroundings, his soldier's instincts automatically cataloging every threat. The lower levels of Black Reach were like a hunting ground for predators. Gangs roamed these corridors looking for easy targets. Slavers paid good money for exotic aliens. Mercenaries would sell their own mothers for the right price. This woman, this frightened, desperate creature kneeling before him, was exactly the kind of prey they were all looking for. He had heard the stories whispered in dark corners of stations, like this one. Stories about aliens from shattered worlds, their entire civilizations wiped out by war or plague or simple human greed. Their homes had been reduced to nothing but floating debris drifting through the cold emptiness of space. The lucky ones found work as servants or laborers in the inner systems. The unlucky ones, Alec forced that thought away before it could take root in his mind. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to walk away, to turn around and pretend this encounter had never happened. He didn't need this kind of trouble. In his life, he had fought too many battles that weren't his to fight. He had made too many enemies in the name of helping people who couldn't be saved. He had learned the hard way that being a hero only got you killed, or worse, got the people you were trying to protect killed. But as he stared down at her, watching the way she braced herself for rejection as if she had already accepted that nobody in the universe would help her, something deep inside his chest twisted painfully. She expected him to turn away. She expected him to be just like everyone else who had probably walked past her begging for him without a second glance. "What's your name?" The words came out rougher than he intended, his voice rusty from disuse when it came to showing kindness. She looked up at him with those enormous golden eyes, surprise flickering across her delicate features. For a moment, she seemed unable to speak, as if kindness was so foreign to her that she didn't know how to respond. "Sith," she finally whispered. He nodded slowly. "Where are you from, Sith?" Her gaze dropped to the floor again, her shoulders curling inward as if trying to make herself smaller. It doesn't matter anymore." But it did matter. Alec knew it mattered, could see the pain written in every line of her body. He could tell she wasn't ready to share that particular wound yet, though maybe she never would be. Alec let out a long, slow breath and rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the rough stubble that had grown there over the past few days. He should walk away. He should tell her he didn't need a servant, that she was wasting her time with him. He should do the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing that wouldn't complicate his carefully constructed life of solitude. Instead, he found himself saying, "I don't need a maid." Something in her expression cracked like glass. The tiny flicker of hope that had appeared in her golden eyes died instantly, snuffed out like a candle in a windstorm. She swallowed hard, the sound audible in the sudden silence between them, and took a step backward. I understand," she managed to say, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm sorry to have bothered you." She turned to leave, her movements stiff with wounded pride and crushing disappointment. "Wait," she froze mid-step, not daring to turn around, as if afraid that looking at him might break whatever spell had made him call out to her. Alec's jaw tightened as he glanced around the dim alley where they stood. A group of station thugs lingered in the distance, their predatory eyes already locked onto Sith like wolves watching a wounded deer. He could see the hunger in their faces, could practically hear the credits adding up in their heads as they calculated her worth on the black market. "I said I don't need a maid," he repeated, his voice gaining strength. "But I could use a roommate." Sith slowly turned around, blinking as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "A roommate? You need a place to stay, right?" Alec shrugged, trying to make it sound casual even though his heart was pounding against his ribs. "I have a spare room. You don't have to serve me or cook my food or clean my boots. Just don't steal my stuff and we'll get along fine." She stared at him in complete silence, her mouth slightly open in shock. Then, to his surprise, her lips began to tremble and she let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, the sound of someone who had forgotten what hope felt like suddenly remembering. "I won't steal from you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I promise." "Good." He gestured for her to follow him, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Come on, before someone decides to make you an offer you can't refuse." Sith hesitated. For only a moment, her golden eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. Then she fell into step beside him, staying close enough to follow but far enough away to run if she needed to. She didn't know why this human had chosen to help her. She didn't trust him, not yet, maybe not ever. But she had run out of options, and sometimes a dangerous choice was better than no choice at all. And Alec, for all his hardened resolve and carefully built walls, couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a decision that would change his life forever. Whether that change would save him or destroy him remained to be seen. As they walked deeper into the maze of Black Reach Station's lower levels, neither of them spoke, but both of them wondered what they had just gotten themselves into. Alec led Sith through the winding corridors of Black Reach Station's lower levels, his heavy boots creating a steady rhythm against the metal grating beneath their feet. The air was thick and oppressive, filled with the scent of machine oil, unwashed bodies, and something more bitter, burnt ozone from electrical systems that had seen better decades, or maybe the lingering traces of a recent plasma weapon discharge. Either way, the entire place reeked of desperation and broken dreams. He kept his pace steady, neither too fast nor too slow, while keeping watch on Sith from the corner of his eye. She moved like a wild animal that had been caged along, every step calculated, every muscle ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Her golden eyes never stopped moving, flicking to every shadow, every doorway, every potential hiding spot, as if expecting something terrible to emerge from the darkness. She wasn't just scared, she was absolutely terrified. Alec had seen that look before, painted across the faces of soldiers fresh from their first real battle, or refugees clutching the broken remnants of their old lives. Sith carried that same haunted expression, the same tight tension of someone who had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. He didn't blame her for being suspicious. Blackreach Station was no place for someone like her. Hell, it wasn't really a place for anyone decent, but especially not for an alien woman, alone and defenseless, with no credits, no allies, and no way off this floating tomb. He could already tell she had been stuck here for a while. Her clothes were too torn, too thoroughly ruined for this to be a recent fall from grace. That raised some uncomfortable questions. How had she ended up here? What was she running from? And why hadn't someone already snatched her up for the slave markets? Alec didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he took a sharp left turn down an even narrower corridor, past a malfunctioning neon sign that flickered weakly in a language that had been dead for centuries. The rusted door at the end led to the cramped apartment he called home, a dingy but private space tucked away in the station's forgotten corners, the kind of place where nobody asked uncomfortable questions about your past. He punched in his access code, and the door slid open with the painful groan of old hydraulics that needed maintenance. He couldn't afford. It's not much, he muttered, stepping aside to let Sith enter first. But it's better than sleeping in back alleys. She hesitated at the threshold, her fingers tightening around the edges of her tattered cloak. For a terrifying moment, he thought she might change her mind, that she'd panic and bolt the second she felt trapped. But then, with visible effort, she stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, barely more than a single cramped room with a kitchenette shoved against one wall like an afterthought. A doorway led to what had once been intended as storage space, but which Alec had converted into a makeshift bedroom for those nights when he couldn't face sleeping on the main room's fold-out cot. It wasn't homey or comfortable, but it was safe. More importantly, it was private. Sith moved through the space like she was cataloging everything, every potential weapon, every escape route, every place someone could hide to ambush her. It reminded him painfully of a cornered animal trying to assess whether it had wandered into a trap. Alec locked the door behind them and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his chest. I meant what I said out there. You don't owe me anything. Sith turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Why? He raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why help me? Her voice was quiet but steady, as if she had been carrying this question around for a long time. No one else did. Alec let out a long breath and ran a hand through his hair, buying himself time to think. The honest answer was complicated and probably wouldn't make sense to her. How could he explain about Marcus? About the friend he had left behind? About the guilt that ate at him every single day? I don't know, he said finally. But that wasn't entirely true. He knew exactly why he had helped her. Because 5 years ago, he had abandoned someone who needed him. A soldier, a friend, a man who had looked at Alec with the same desperate pleading that he had seen in Sith's golden eyes. Someone who had been trying not to show how close they were to completely breaking apart. And Alec had failed them. He had walked away when it mattered most. He had spent years telling himself there was nothing he could have done differently. That war took people unfairly and randomly. That guilt and regret wouldn't change anything or bring anyone back. But none of those logical excuses had ever felt like enough to quiet the voice in his head that whispered coward in the dark hours before dawn. Maybe helping Sith was his way of trying to balance the scales. Maybe it was his pathetic attempt at redemption. Or maybe he just couldn't stand the thought of another person slipping through the cracks while he stood by and did nothing, like he had done before. Sith studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his thoughts or pick apart his hidden motivations. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay. Alec pushed himself away from the door and gestured toward the smaller room. You can sleep in there. It's not fancy, but it's yours for as long as you need it. She hesitated before walking past him, her movements still cautious, her body still tense and ready to fight or flee. But she went. Alec didn't say anything as she disappeared into the room. He just stood there in the main living space, listening to the quiet sounds of her settling in the soft rustle of fabric as she sat down on the narrow cot. The barely audible sigh as the weight of exhaustion finally caught up with her. He should have felt uneasy about this decision. Bringing a stranger into his home, an alien stranger, no less, was a massive risk. It went against everything he had trained himself to do over the years, every survival instinct he had developed since leaving the military. And yet, as he stood there in the dim light of his apartment, listening to the quiet breathing of someone who had nowhere else to go. Alec realized something that surprised him. For the first time in 5 long years, he didn't feel like a man running from ghosts. He felt like someone who had finally stopped to face one. Alec woke in the gray hour before the station's artificial sunrise, his body responding to old military instincts rather than actual need. Years of training had conditioned him to rise early, to be alert and ready before his conscious mind fully caught up with his surroundings. He sat up slowly on his fold-out cot, rubbing a hand over his face as he adjusted to the dim glow of the apartment's flickering ceiling lights. The silence was heavy and complete, broken only by the soft, ever-present hum of Black Reach stations, life support systems, and the occasional distant murmur of the gradually waking city beyond his walls. He found himself listening more carefully than usual, tuning into the subtle sounds that filled his small living space. His own measured breathing, the faint hiss of steam escaping from old pipes that needed repair, the barely audible whisper of recycled air moving through ventilation ducts. And then movement, not loud, but definitely there. The sound of shifting fabric, controlled, careful footsteps, the slight creak of metal under weight. Sith. It had been years since he had shared his living space with anyone. Even during his military service, he had kept to himself, staying just close enough to his squad to function as part of the unit, but never close enough to actually care about them as individuals. He had made that mistake once, just once, and the consequences had nearly destroyed him. Now, lying in the dim light of early morning, Alec found himself hyper-aware of another person's presence in his carefully controlled world. And despite everything, despite his better judgment, despite his hard-learned lessons about getting involved, he realized he didn't mind it as much as he had expected to. Strike. The station had its own rhythm, its own undercurrent of movement and sound, and right now something was disrupting it. Alec kept his head down, hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket as he weaved through the crowded walkways of the lower market district. The neon lights overhead buzzed intermittently, flickering across rusted walls and cracked flooring. Merchants called out their wares, the scent of synthetic spices mingling with the acrid stench of burning metal from a nearby repair shop. It was business as usual, except it wasn't. He could feel it. Blackreach wasn't lawless. Not exactly. It had its own order, its own unspoken rules, thick-and enforced by mercs, smugglers, and corporate interests that operated in the shadows. And right now someone was breaking those rules. Someone was looking for something, or someone. Alex Joe tightened Citri. He hadn't told her he was leaving, hadn't wanted to wake her after the hells she had been through. But now, as the weight of something unseen pressed down on him, he regretted not warning her. Pushing forward, he navigated toward the market's quieter side, where information was the only currency that mattered. Marv's stall was tucked between two larger vendors, a simple metal counter covered in old data pads and outdated security. Clearin Marv himself was short and stocky, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that came from spending too many years surviving in places like this. He looked up as Alec approached, eyes narrowing Boliv. He leaned on the counter. Didn't think I'd see you today. Need a favor? Marv grunted. Don't we all? He tapped at his data pad. You looking for work or something else? Alec didn't answer immediately. Medley. He glanced around, scanning the market before lowering. Hisfawis. You hear anything unusual? Someone asking the wrong kinds of questions. Marv's fingers paused over the screen. His real eye flicked to Alec, while the cybernetic implant in his left socket whirred slightly as it adjusted. Focus depends. On what kind of questions, you mean? Alex's expression didn't change. Means looking for a stray. Marv exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. Yeah, word is someone sniffing around. Not a bounty, not an open contract, just whispers. That was worse than a bounty. That meant whoever was searching didn't want competition. What do they know? Alec asked. Not much. Just that they're looking for someone non-human. Marv hesitated, and that they didn't want anyone else knowing. Alec kept his face neutral, but inside, his mind was already racing. Someone powerful was behind this. Someone careful. C3 wasn't just a runaway, she was a problem that needed to be erased. And now so was he. Any names? Alecast. Marv shook his head. Not yet, but whoever they are, they've got money. That meant speed. That meant resources. That meant time was running out. Alex slid a few credits across the counter. Let me know if that changes. Marv took them without hesitation. You should lay low, Vav. Alec didn't answer. He was already walking away. By the time Alec returned to the apartment, his mind was a storm of calculation. They were out of time. Themant. He stepped through the door. Sith was already waiting. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, her golden eyes locked onto him. The second he entered, she had changed, traded the raged cloak for one of his spare shirts, the sleeves rolled up to accommodate her slender frame. She looked better, less fragile. Her expression told him she already knew what he was about to say. They found me. It wasn't a question. Alex set a small case down on the table. Not yet, but they're looking. Sith exhaled slowly, fingers tightening against her arms. How bad? Bad. Alex met her gaze. They're not advertising it. They're keeping it quiet. Sith nodded as if she had expected that answer. Then I should leave, Alex. Jaw tensed. She narrowed her eyes. You don't get to decide that. You walk out that door and you won't make it past the docks. His voice was calm. Even you think you are good at running. The people looking for you are better at hunting. C's posture was rigid, every part of her radiating resistance. And what do you suggest? That I just sit here and wait to be found? Alec didn't flinch. No, Eastaprunning. We find out who they are first. Sith blink. You're suggesting we go looking for them. You want to stay alive, don't you? Sith hesitated. Alec took a step closer, voice lowering. Whoever they are, they already think you're dead. That means they're not looking for a fight. They're looking to clean up loose ends. Sith exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. And what happens when we find them? You think you can take on an entire operation alone? Alex smirked. Not alone, but I have a few tricks left. She studied him, her golden eyes arching. His face. You don't owe me this, Alec. His expression didn't change. Yeah, Edo. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then finally Sith let out a breath. Oh, Alec nodded. Good. Now let's make sure you are not caught off guard. He gestured to the case on the table. I got us Soma security upgrades. Silent motion sensors. If someone gets too close, we'll know. C3 arched a brow. And if they get inside? Alec's smirk faded. Then we stop. Theme and another beat of silence. Then slowly Sith nodded. They had a plan. It wasn't a good one, but it was better than waiting to die. Alec had learned long ago how to spot trouble before it found him. Black Reach Station wasn't a quiet place. It was a tangled mass of forgotten souls, criminals and traitors looking for easy credits. It never truly slept. But tonight it felt different. The usual hum of fellower levels, the distant shouts of vendors, the occasional scuffle in the alleyways, the mechanical groan of fancient ventilation systems was still there. But beneath it was a tension. Something was brewing, and Alec had no doubt that it had everything to do with Sith. He adjusted the strap of the small supply bag slung over his shoulder and kept walking, his boots making steady measured steps against the worn metal flooring. His route home took him through one of the less traveled corridors, a shortcut between the market and the lower residential blocks. It was quieter here, the flickering neon lights barely illuminating the narrow passage. Too quiet, his instincts screamed at him Asakon before he heard the footsteps. Not the random, erratic shuffle of a drunk or a desperate pickpocket. These were controlled, measured, a trained step. They weren't following him by accident. Alec didn't break stride. Instead, he slowed slightly, giving them a chance to make a move. They did. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead of him, stepping into the dim light, a tall man, human or Klasina, to pass, with short cropped hair and a lean muscular frame. His clothes were practical, reinforced with light armor that suggested he was expecting trouble. Alec barely had time to register him before Isakon's presence shifted behind him, another one smart blocking off Highscape. A setup. Alex sighed. If this is a mugging, you're going to be very disappointed. The first man smirked. We not interested in your credits, Vav. That got his attention. Alec tilted his head slightly. So you know me, that makes this interesting. The second figure spoke, a woman this time, her voice smooth, cliphead professional. We know you. Have her. Citri's expression didn't change. Butte inside, his mind was already calculating the odds. Two opponents, armed, probably professional, not station thugs, too well coordinated, not in if they would fight. I didn't know what you're talking about, Alec. said casually, shifting his stance slightly. I live alone, the man chuckled. Come on Vov, let not waste time, we're not here to make a scene, just hand her over and we all walk away. Hand who over? Alec played dumb. The woman sighed. The stray, the survivor, the one who shouldn't exist. Ollie clenched his jaw. That confirmed it. They weren't just hunting Sith, they wanted to erase her. No loose ends, no witnesses, and that meant if he gave her up she'd be dead within the hour. He shifted his weight just slightly, enough to prepare. Man caught it and tensed. I wouldn't what? Alec asked mildly. Bestupid. Alec smiled just a little too late, then he moved faster than Thigh expected. He dropped low, sweeping the first man's legs out from under him. The woman reacted instantly, going for a weapon, but Alec was already turning, slamming an elbow into her ribs. She staggered back, but not far enough. Heberly missed the knife she had drawn. Professionals, definitely. The man was already recovering, pushing himself up. Alec didn't give him the chance. He drove his boot into the guy's chest, sending him crashing back into the wall. The woman lunged. Alec twisted just in time, blade grazing his jacket instead of his ribs. He caught her wrist, twisted hard, and the knife clattered to the ground. She cursed, but he didn't give her second chance. One sharp strike to the side of her head and she dropped. The first man groaned, struggling to rise. Alec knelt beside him, grabbing a fistful off his collar and yanking him forward. Who sent you? The man spat blood onto Theffler and smirked. You already know. Alec's grip tightened. How many Moriri coming? The man laughed low and dark. You think this stops with us? Alec's stomach clenched. He had already guessed the answer, but hearing it confirmed was worse. This wasn't a job, this was a hunt, and Sith was the prize. Alec released him, Rolly standing. Tell whoever sent you, they're wasting their time. The man wiped his mouth, still smiling. You don't get it, do you? Alec turned away. No, I just don't care. He walked off before he could change his mind and do something permanent. By the time he reached the apartment, Alec was bleeding. Not badly, a shallow cut on his arm, a bruise forming in his ribs, but enough that Sith noticed. The second he stepped through the door, she was standing in the small living area, her arms crossed tightly, her golden eyes narrowing. What happened? Alec didn't answer immediately. He set the supply bag down and pulled off his jacket, inspecting the tear in the sleeve where the knife had grazed him. Sith stepped closer, gaze flicking to the blood on his arm. Alec, hide. They found us. Cease. Fingers curled into fists. How many? To there'll be more. She exhaled, slowly steadying herself. Then I should go. Alec looked at her sharply. That's the dumbest thing you've said since I met you. C3 scowled. If I leave they stop coming. No, if you leave they find you faster. Alec ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Listentomi, they don't want to capture you. They want you gone. You run, you die. She held his gaze, something fierce burning behind her eyes. Then what do you suggest? Alec grabbed a small case from the supply bag and tossed it onto the table. We stopped playing defensive. Blinked. What's this? Security upgrades, motion sensors, heat trackings, and alarms. No one gets close without us knowing. She frowned. And after that, Alec met her gaze. We stop waiting for them to come to us. I inhaled sharply. You want to hunt them? I want to find out who they are, who sent them, what they want. Alex's voice was steady, firm. We doth it. We stop running. We take control of this Sith. Didn't answer immediately. Then finally she nodded. All right. Bick exhaled. They were in this together now, and for better or worse, there was no turning back. The apartment smelled of sweat, blood, and the metallic tang of scorched wiring. The walls were too thin, the air too stale, and outside the door death was closing. Alex stood near the entrance, pistol in hand, his breathing steady despite the tightness in his chest. Sith was across the room, crouched near the small table, a combat knife gripped in her fingers. The emergency lights flickered, bathing the room in a dim red glow. A warning that Black Reach Station was on high alert. He had minutes, maybe less. C's golden eyes darted toward the door. How many? Alec didn't answer right away. He had been counting the movement in the corridor, listening for the distinct pattern of boots against metal. 3, maybe 4, and those were just the ones she could hear. Enough, he muttered. Sith exhaled sharply. We need to move. Alec's grip tightened on the pistol. They'll expect that. Then we give them something they don't expect. Alec looked at her, then really looked at her. Sith wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. Her body was wound tight, every muscle coiled for action, but her expression was calm, controlled. She had been running for so long, but this was different. This wasn't running, this was fighting back. Alec made a decision. Follow my lead. The first enforcer barely had time to react when Alec burst through the door. A sharp crack rang through the corridor. As Alex's pistol fired the first shot, striking the nearest man's center. Mass force sent him stumbling back against the wall, but Alec didn't stop. He surged forward, slamming his elbow into the second attacker's jaw before he could draw his weapon. Sith was right behind him. She moved like a shadow, fast and precise, her knife finding the weak points in the armor of the third enforcer. The man let out a strangled gasp, his hands flying to his throat as he crumpled. The fourth hesitated just a second. Too long didn't hesitate. A single shot to the knee took the enforcer down. His scream cut short as Sith drove her knee into his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. 5 seconds. That's all it had taken. Alice exhaled, stepping over one of the bodies. That won't be all of them. Sith wiped her blade on the sleeve of a fallen enforcer. Then we keep moving. They didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The corridor doors of the lower levels were crawling with enforcers, their presence heavier than Alec had ever seen. They had triggered a station-wide lockdown, and that meant one thing. Whoever was after them wasn't just cleaning up loose ends anymore. They were making a statement. Alec led Sith through the maze of back alleys and maintenance shafts, their footsteps silent. Against the grated flooring, the air was thick with the scent of burning oil and old metal, the dim lighting flickering overhead. They had one chance to get out docking bays. By the time they reached the outer sector of the station, Alec knew they were running out of time. Pressed his back against the cold metal of a storage crate, glancing around the corner toward the security pont. 2 guards, well armed, positioned at the only access point to the docking platforms. Sith crouched bid him, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we take them? Alec considered their options. They could fight fast, brutal, but messy. The second gunfire rang out, the entire station would come down on them. Or they could find another way. Alex's gaze flicked upward to the ventilation system running along the ceiling. The maintenance hatch above them was slightly ajar, just wide enough to squeeze through. Not ideal, but it would work. He turned to Sith. Hope you're not afraid of tight space. Raised an eyebrow. You're kidding? Nope. Alec jumped, gripping the edge off hatch, then hoisted himself up with practiced ease. He reached down, offering her a hand. Come on. Sith sighed, but didn't argue. She grabbed his hand, her grip strong and sure as he pulled her up. The vents were narrow, barely wide enough for them to move through, but they were silent, and right now, silence was survival. They crawled forward, the metal cool beneath their hands. Below them, the guards remained unaware of their presence. Their voices echoing faintly through the ventilation shafts. Alec kept moving, counting every turn in his head, mapping out the station structure in his mind. The exit was close, then finally an opening. Alec peered through the vent grating, his eyes locking onto the docking bay below. Their way out was sitting right there, a small cargo freighter, its loading ramp still open. Si nudged his shoulder. That one. Alex smirked. That one. They hit the ground running. The second they dropped from the vent, Alec knew they had seconds before someone noticed them. Sith was already moving her feet, barely making a sound as she sprinted toward the ship. Alec wasn't far behind. The freighter wasn't attended. Either a stroke of luck, or someone had left in a hurry. Either way, they weren't asking permission. Alec reached the controls first, slamming his fist against the emergency override panel. The loading ramp began to rise with a slow mechanical hiss. Sith slid into the co-pilot seat as Alec threw himself into the pilot chair, his hands flying over the controls. Engines online, docking clamps released, thrusters primed. The ship lurched as the systems were read to life, the sound of power surging through its frame. Then alarms. The ducking bay doors locked down. Scythe cursed. They're sealing the exits. Alec didn't slow. Not for long. Hera routed power to the ship's forward thrusters, overriding the station's lockdown protocol. The engine screamed in protest, the entire ship vibrating under the force of the sudden surge. Per second, nothing happened. Then with a deafening crack, the docking bay door buckled. Alec didn't wait for clearance. He punched the throttle. The freighter shot forward, breaking free from the station's grip, tearing into the void of space with a force that pressed them into their seats. Black Reach Station shrank behind them, alarms still flashing in the distance. They had Maddie. For now. Alec exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. As the adrenaline finally started to fade, Tiri let out a slow breath, her hands gripping the edge of the console. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then finally, Sith spoke. That was insane. Alex smirked. You're welcome. She turned her head, her golden eyes flicking toward him. There was something different in her gaze, nosemithing that hadn't been there before. Trust. And maybe something more. For the first time in a long time, neither of them were running, and neither of them were alone. The vast emptiness off space stretched endlessly before them, a sea of stars scattered across the void like distant lanterns. Inside the ship, the hum of the engines was the only sound breaking the silence. They had made it out of Blackreach alive. Alex sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting on the controls. Though there was nothing left to steer, they were in open space now, far beyond the station's reach, their pursuers lost in the chaos of their escape. For the first time in weeks, there was no immediate threat looming over them, and yet he still couldn't shake the tension coiled in his chest. Sith sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her, her golden eyes fixed on the viewport. Her expression wasn't readable, but Alec knew that look. It was the look of someone who had spent too long fighting to survive and didn't know what to do with the quiet. "You okay?" he asked. She let out a soft breath, running a hand through her long black hair. "I don't know." Alec leaned back, watching her. "We made it." Sith let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Did we?" She turned to face him, something flickering behind her gaze. "They're still out there. Aloever, they are whatever they wanted from me. None of that is gone," Alex said, rubbing his jaw. "No, but for now they've lost us." She studied him for a long moment before shaking her head. "You really believe that, don't you?" Shrugged. "I believe we've bought ourselves some time." Sith exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping. "And what do we do with that time?" Alec tilted his head, considering her. That's up to you." She blinked at him. "What?" He gestured vaguely toward the viewport. "This is your fight, Sith. I got you off Black Reach because I didn't like the idea of watching you die. But what happens now? That's your call." Citri hesitated, and for the first time since Sethi met, Alex saw something other than steel in her eyes. She was afraid, not of death, not of the people hunting her. She was afraid of having a choice. For so long, she had been running, surviving, reacting, never stopping long enough to decide what came next. Alex softened his voice. "What do you want?" Sith opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she wasn't sure she even had the words. She had no home to go back to, no family left, no future she had imagined beyond survival. Finally, she admitted, "I don't now." Alec didn't push. Instead, he stood and walked over to the small kitchen, rummaging through a storage compartment. He pulled out a ration pack and tossed it to her. "Then while you figure it out, eat something." Sith caught the pack, giving him a skeptical look. "You'll waste this." Charming, Alex smirked. "Only when I'm exhausted." For the first time that night, Sith smiled. They sat in the dim glow of the ship's overhead lights, the tension between them slowly easing into something more bearable. Sith ate in small, measured bites, her body still humming with the residual tension of the fight. Alec nursed a cup of coffee, watching her from the corner of his eye. She was beautiful, not just in the way she looked, though her violet skin and golden eyes made her striking in a way that was impossible to ignore. It was in the way she moved, the quiet strength she carried despite everything she had been through. She caught him staring and arched a brow. "What?" Alec took a slow sip of coffee. "Nothing." Sith narrowed her eyes. Alec chuckled. "I was just thinking dangerous." "I know." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then quietly, Sith spoke. "You could have left me back at the apartment," Alex said, his coffee down. "Yeah, but you didn't." He looked either, meeting her gaze head on. "No." C3 swallowed her throat, bobbing. Alec considered lying, brushing it off, making a joke. "But she deserved that truth because I didn't want to." C's breath hitched slightly, just enough that Alec noticed. She set her half-empty ration pack down and shifted in, her seether fingers curling against the fabric of her pants. She looked like she wanted to say something. Alec waited. Then slowly, hesitantly, she reached across the table. Her fingers brushed against his just delicate touch, like she was testing to see if he would pull away. He didn't. Alec turned his hand, letting their fingers entwine. Her skin was warm, her grip firmer than he expected. Sith let out a slow breath, her eyes never leaving his. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "I just know that for the first time in a long time, I don't want to be alone." Alec squeezed her fingers lightly. "You're not." A pause. Then Sith moved. She leaned forward, closing the space between them in slow, deliberate movements. Alec didn't stop her, didn't want to. When she pressed her lips To his it was hesitant at first and certain, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to want this. Alec made Suresh new. He kissed her back, slow and deep, his free hand coming up to cup the side of her face. Citri let out a quiet sigh against his lips, her fingers tightening around his. For a moment the universe didn't exist. No hunters, no past, no ghosts, just this. When they finally pulled apart, C's breath was shaky, her golden eyes searching his. Alex smirked, voice rough yet full of surprises. Sith let out a soft, breathy laugh. So are you. Alec ran his thumb lightly over her knuckles. So what now? Sith exhaled, leaning her forehead against his. I guess we figure it out. Alex smiled together, and for the first time in years neither of them were running. The silence of deep space stretched before them, an infinite sea of darkness dotted with distant stars. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, rhythmic, a quiet reminder that for the first time in a long time, they weren't running. Alex sat in the cockpit, hands resting loosely on the controls. Even though there was nowhere urgent to go, his body was still, but his mind wasn't. It hadn't been for days. Sith was there too, sitting on the edge of the co-pilot's chair, her golden eyes fixed on the void beyond the viewport. She had been quiet since they'd escaped Black Reach, lost in thought. In Marie's Alec couldn't begin to understand. They were free, and yet neither of them seemed to know what to do with that freedom. Alec turned slightly, watching her from the corner of his eye. Her expression was unreadable, but he had learned to see the cracks beneath it. She wasn't afraid, not of the past, not of what they had survived. Butch was afraid of what came next. He understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. You ever seen a sunrise from orbit? Alec asked, breaking the silence. Sith blinked, turning to him. Nolik smirked. You're about to. He reached for the navigation controls, adjusting the ship's course. The vessel shifted, angling toward a nearby planet, a small and remarkable world with a thin golden atmosphere. As they descended, the light from its sun began creeping over the horizon. The dark emptiness of space melted into a breathtaking wash of color, deep reds and oranges blending into soft hues of violet and gold. Sri inhaled deeply, her fingers tightening around the armrests of her chair. Alec had seen many things in his life: battles, destruction, the cold silence of space. But at that moment, watching C's face illuminated by the light of a new dawn, he realized he had never seen anything quite like this. She turned to him, her golden eyes shimmering in the glow. It's beautiful. Oleg nodded. Yeah, it is. She studied him for a moment, something shifting in her gaze, a softness, a warmth he hadn't seen before, and then slowly she reached for him. Her fingers brushed against his, hesitant at first, then firmer as he took her hand in his own. Her skin was warm, her grip strong. Alec pulled her closer, his hand tangling in her long dark hair as she pressed against him. Citri sighed softly into the kiss, her fingers sliding up his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt like she was afraid he might pull away. He didn't. When they finally parted, Sith rested her forehead against his, her breath uneven but steady. I never thought he'd get to have this. Alex's voice was rough, low. You do. Sithie exhaled a shaky breath, then a smile. Small but real. Alex smirked, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. I should take you to see Morrison Reese's. She let out a soft laugh. I'd like that. A comfortable silence settled between them, the weight of their past finally starting to lift. For the first time, they weren't running. For the first time, they had a future. And for the first